Said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our speakers today. You're going to be hearing from two folks from ELB Learning, Vice President of Strategy and Execution, Paul Curto, and Client Solutions Consultant, Micah Epler. I'm going to turn things over to Paul and Micah now. Paul and Micah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, right? We're going to be focused on missing the mark, right? Reimagining sales enablement in life sciences, why traditional enablement strategies are falling short, and how to fix them. So my name, as Tim mentioned, is Micah Epler. I am a client solution specialist here at ELB Learning. So whether you're joining us from your home office, whether you're joining us in the traditional office, right? Whether you're at an airport gate and sitting around dialing in, appreciate you joining us today.
Great. And I'm Paul Curto. I'm Vice President of Sales Strategy and Execution. And if you're here, chances are you're feeling the pressure. We've got the AI digital disruption age here. Buyer behavior is shifting, and we'll talk about that. There's probably some go-to-market org restructuring in your life. Budgets are not growing typically. So welcome to 2025.
Yeah. You know what, Paul? It's really funny that you mentioned that right off the top. Actually, I saw a stat just the other day that 60% of sales orgs have restructured their go-to-market model in the last 18 months. And apparently, right, the other 40% are still thinking that it's 2019. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of fundamental shifts, Micah, especially in higher regulation sectors like life sciences, but also in tech and financial services. And where enablement used to be a nice to have function, today is just mission critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what today's all about. That's what our topic is going to be focused on today, right? We're not just going to talk, right, high level theory. We're actually going to share real benchmarks, examples, and plays that modern go-to-market teams are using to cut through all that chaos and all this wave of change and continue to win in this type of market.
Absolutely. And hopefully by the end of the session, you're going to have a roadmap for how to rethink your enablement function and some of those key elements that you want to factor in. Enablement should be viewed as an essential part of your growth engine. It's not just a training department anymore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so before we dive in, actually, we'd love to get just a pulse of the room, right? Everybody that's here, we'd love to kind of see where everyone stands, right? We just talked about benchmarks. We'd love to kick off with our first poll here. And so, Tim, if you can go ahead and launch the poll, please. So how confident are you that your enablement strategy directly drives revenue outcomes? We'd love to, again, just get a pulse of what everyone's thoughts are on that, what it's like in your organizations. We'll give it a minute or two here just for everybody to answer, and then we'll move it along.
Yeah, hopefully the missing option isn't what enablement strategy, right? Hopefully there is one.
Well, it looks like most everybody's voted, Micah. I'm going to go ahead and give everyone just a couple of seconds to wrap up, and then I'll close the poll.
Perfect, Tim. Thank you.
Great. Everybody, thanks again for sharing. Let me go ahead and close the poll and show everybody the results.
There we go.
It's about what I expected to see. How about you, Micah?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, somewhere falling in the middle, but unfortunately, right, in this day and age, falling in the middle doesn't truly lead to success anymore. You know what I mean? So this will be great and pertinent to the topic that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and really the holy grail of revenue enablement is driving revenue outcomes. So that's I think a lot of teams are still struggling with that, which is why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we get going here into our first slides, just want to encourage everybody, please, we want this to be as interactive as possible. Please throw your comments, questions, concerns, throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A. We'll address those as we go along here, but let's go ahead and hop into the first slide. So Paul, right? Let's not sugarcoat it, right? If you're leading sales in life sciences right now, it probably feels like the rules of the game have changed. And you know what? Maybe somebody, maybe your game that got sent to you, maybe the instructions weren't included in that one.
Yeah, no, there's rarely instructions, and Micah, what we're seeing right now is really the perfect storm. It's AI disrupting everything. We have again, tighter budgets. Buyers expect more, but they actually want less face time. They kind of prefer a digital experience as opposed to, customer facing, buyer seller experience. And especially in life sciences, we're seeing the shift to digital first healthcare professionals. And, omni-channel has completely rewired the entire field experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it on the screen here, right? But like what used to work 5 years ago, right? That doesn't fit the mold anymore, right? Doesn't fit the model. The landscape has completely changed, and you can see here on the screen, right? This McKinsey stat that 43% of field reps believe that AI has already changed how they prep and prospect for their sales process.
Yeah, and there's a lot of inconsistency there. For myself personally, AI has changed how I do, my research and my prospecting. It really adds a lot of value in terms of how we do that. More than 60% of healthcare professionals now say they prefer digital. They prefer that remote engagement. When they're evaluating new products, they want to do their research online. And that's from a recent IQVIA study. The field is not disappearing, but it's definitely evolving.
Right, right. Yeah. And so you can tell that really speaks to the macro of the change that's going on, right? It's not just in the finer details, it's the whole thing, right? That's shifting. And so, right, that this Forrester stat that's also here on the screen, right? 62% of B2B sales orgs have restructured their entire go-to-market models since 2023 alone, right? That's a staggering number. And in life sciences, it often means integrating medical, marketing, field, and inside sales teams like never before.
Yeah, that's the setup. And really the key takeaway for me, enablement isn't optional, right? It's got to be mission critical in how you think about enablement, how you're structuring it. And if we don't rewire how we're doing onboarding, how we're doing everboarding, how we're doing excellence training, how we're doing coaching, how we're equipping the next generation of leaders as addition to reps. And otherwise, we're not just missing revenue targets, we're actually misfiring the entire model.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more as a rep myself, even as a rep myself that sells into these life sciences companies, right? Understanding that just that landscape, but just couldn't agree. So let's go ahead and unpack, right, what these reps, in this shift, in this wave, in this modern world, right, what they're actually being asked to do. So let's zoom in on what's really driving this reset, right? Because it's not just one thing. Like I said, it's a wave, right? It's everything all at once.
Right. So let's start at the top. Let's talk about AI. So AI is revolutionizing all sectors, right? But it's also commoditizing knowledge faster than we can repackage it. Sales reps used to differentiate by, what they knew and who they knew, and now they have to lead with how they engage. We're seeing a lot of bot-like outreach, a lot of very commoditized outreach, very bland, in the form of, cadences from reps. And what we really need to lead with is empathy. We need to provide insight, and we need to be relevant for the buyer. Otherwise, they're just getting spammed and they're just going to delete it.
Yeah. Quick aside here, Paul, just on that relevance part, right? How should reps be relevant to clients as they're doing their outreach?
Yeah, I think being relevant really has a lot to do with how you're doing your research and how you're understanding the client's business and how well you're you know asserting yourself in terms of a valid business partner to them. um, right now we're seeing go to market teams are kind of collapsing in on themselves, and you've got these these hybrid sellers, and you've got these different pod models, and you have RevOps kind of sitting there, and no one's quite sure who owns what. But the old silos don't really hold anymore. And so in the middle of this, reps are being asked to do a lot more, more activities, more forecasting, more personalization, and do it all with fewer resources. So we're really starting to hit a complexity ceiling. And within that, we still have to learn to be relevant.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so no wonder, 78% of CROs out there right now are saying that their go-to-market strategy is under complete review, right? It's not just a reset, it's not just a rethink, like it's a full-on reinvention of what they're doing from the go-to-market standpoint. And so with that, actually, Tim, we'd love to throw up our second poll question here. So what is your biggest challenge in the sales performance right now? I'm really curious about this one from the audience. Would love to get your input here. There's a lot of challenges that go-to-market teams face, that reps are facing, that sales strategy, right, sales ops are facing. I'm very curious to see what the results are with this one.
Some might be thinking option E for all of the above.
Right. Tim, how are we looking on responses here?
We're looking good again. Folks, I'll give you just a few more seconds and I'll close off the poll.
Perfect.
Great. Everybody, thanks so much for sharing. Appreciate that. And there you go, Micah.
There we go. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Spread pretty evenly here
Spread out.
across all four, which is that's really curious actually. I'm I often hear a lot about onboarding new reps, and so it's interesting that one comes in at the lowest. But right, sales process execution and messaging and value articulation come in tied there. Paul, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I just think it shows that every company has its own kind of unique areas that they need to focus. I think for companies that are trying to expand quickly or maybe have a lot of churn, the onboarding has to be a key part of it. Otherwise, you're going to miss your number by, you know, nature of just having to backfill, right, the quotas, from your high performers. And then how we coach as a culture seems to be a very common theme as well. How we develop managers. A lot of times we'll take reps and just promote them into manager roles without really, teaching them how to manage salespeople effectively. So in the sales process and the execution of it, that's such an important factor for the RevOps leaders and also the sales leaders. Without process and execution, you can't drive forecasting with any accuracy. And then obviously the messaging and values is a key part of any value exchange. So all of that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also would have been curious if we had made this question multi-select, right? We're asking people to put their biggest challenge, right, that they're facing, not what are all of the challenges. I wonder how much this evens out if people are able to multi-select on this one. So, okay, well, let's go ahead and close that out. Tim, thank you very much, and let's go ahead and we'll move on to the next slide here, right? So, we've talked about the seismic shifts around sales teams, right? But let's zoom in on what are reps actually being asked to do today.
Yeah, it seems to me, in short, everything, right? It's reps aren't just sellers anymore. They're prospecting is a big part of their job. We're asking them to do. They have to be more consultative in how they approach customers. They can't just be pushing products because that's not going to fly. For customers that are existing customers, we expect them to renew, and we do typically have success people in charge of that. But the sales reps play a role in the renewals as well. Sometimes they're functioning as the renewals manager. We talked about value, being able to sell value. We don't necessarily teach reps how to sell value, but they have to navigate value in some fashion so that you're not stuck as a commodity at the end of the sale and discounting the heck out of the deal. And of course, we're asking them to be a Salesforce administrator and deal with all of the various administrative tasks. And all of that's before lunchtime, Micah.
Yeah. So you're actually referring to full stack sellers.
Yeah, full stack, I think is a good way to describe it. Exactly. And life sciences, it's not just about selling. It's, account managers are also being expected to get involved in the health sciences aspect of the job, right? So decoding clinical data or, influencing across a matrix of stakeholders. When you think about all the key players in a hospital, or in terms of a pharma rep, and then navigating all the strict compliance around HIPAA and some of those other aspects without creating a legal situation, all while building trust and earning that right for a seat at the table.
Right. And let's not forget about the entire environment, right, that they're doing all of this in, right? Whether we're talking about new reps, existing reps, we're talking about shorter onboarding times, we're talking about more pressure to hit quotas, to ramp quickly, to execute on activity metrics, right? To hit all these KPIs and OKRs that organizations are concerned about, not to mention in a stack of tools that, right, they're supposed to make things easier, right, but often just create complexity and noise within their day-to-day flow.
Yeah, and the tools are evolving. So that's a really complex area. It's just how to use the tools to your best advantage, how to get the value and the efficiency and effectiveness out of it. So that's why we say sales just isn't a profession anymore. It's a performance discipline. You need to treat it like an athlete and be agile and exercise every day. And that's how you're going to be better and better at performing. Expectations are always going to be rising, and unless enablement evolves with it, the performance gap's going to keep widening.
Yeah, the athlete analogy is an interesting one because I even think about it as like you got to be a multi-sport athlete right at this point, right? There's a lot of information out there about uh, doing one sport too much too early, right? If right, then we get fatigue and we get burnout in those areas. So you really got to be able to multitask and be agile, like you mentioned. That's an interesting one. So let's go ahead and benchmark then what high performing go-to-market teams are doing differently, because there are some orgs out there that are cracking the code and being successful. So let's get a little bit honest here. And again, I want to really encourage everybody that's here on the call with us, right? Please throw your thoughts in the chats. If we have any questions, use the Q&A. We'd love to engage with you here, but let's get a little bit honest, right? When it comes to sales performance, most teams think that they're doing fine until they actually see the benchmarks.
Yeah, I think we want to skip to the next slide here, right?
Oh, did I not move it? My bad. Hold on. Let's do
No, you're
that.
good.
We're
Yeah, I just wanted to
multitasking.
talk to some of the data here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, let's hold up the mirror for just a minute and let's see how top performing commercial teams stack up against the median. Let's go through it. What's first
Okay.
up here?
So first up, quota attainment, right?
Yep.
The median is 48%. That means more than half of reps in most orgs are actually missing quota.
Yeah, and that's such a massive gap when you think about performance and you think about growth. Meanwhile, the top quartile, if you will, what about them? And 76% is a good number, but really it should be higher than that as well. But it's still a massive gap. So it's really not just about skill. It's got to be more than that. It's probably systems, it's process, it's enablement, it's the whole kind of piece to that that's leading to that underperformance gap.
Yeah, that's impactful for sure. So let's talk about the next one, right? Pipeline coverage. The average org is sitting at 2.2 times, right, X in their pipeline, right? That sounds decent until you look at elite teams, right, and what they're driving, which is actually 3.5 times what their quota should be, right? That extra pipeline creates flexibility, confidence, and strategic choice.
Yeah, exactly. And 3x is always that rule of thumb because the customer has one of three options, right? They can either go with your product and solution, go with the competitor's product or solution, or go with none of the above and do nothing. So a lot of times you're competing against doing nothing. And the quality of your pipeline coverage is really critical. And getting better at qualifying in, getting better at understanding the pain and the compelling event are all really key factors in that. And without that, without the coverage and without the quality understanding, the forecasting really does turn into guesswork, becomes very reactive, and can create a lot of friction for especially the sales leadership as they're reporting into the board about their pipeline.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So without that coverage, right? Or sorry, excuse me. Um, last one here. Sorry, ramp time. 6.2 months is the average ramp time for a rep. That's a long wait to see productivity from a new hire.
Yeah, it is. And when you think about productivity, it's really about ramping to productivity. So how long does it take not only to learn all of the knowledge and skill set of that particular organization and speak to it with credibility, it's also about building an effective pipeline so that you can get to your number. And so that ramp time being 6.2 months of an average, obviously better performing companies are streamlining it. They're accelerating it, and a 4-month target for a closing rep is a pretty good number there. Enablement plays such a critical role in that acceleration.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to challenge the folks on the call here, right? Where would you say that your teams land on this chart, right? Are you around the median? Do you feel like you're in the top quartile, or are you still looking for that visibility into your data, right? Still trying to define what pipeline coverage is. I'd be curious to know right, what that looks like. So I challenge y'all to throw that in the chat.
Yeah, and as you're thinking that through and maybe just reflecting on it, this is where we can actually help you guys, right? Let's take a look at what top performers actually do differently in the next slide when we get to it to get those types of higher performing results.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, we've talked about how most commercial teams are under immense pressure, right? Too many tools, not enough alignment, shifting buyer behavior, shifting markets, but some teams are breaking through. So the question of the hour really is, right? What are the best really doing differently?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Micah. So when we dig into the data, whether through a benchmarking capability or other diagnostics, we consistently see 5 key practices that are separating the top quartile from the rest. So let's walk through those quickly. So first one is clarity in role and the design of the role. When you think about benchmarking and things like that, knowing what a really good quality rep or someone in that role is supposed to do and defining that with a lot of clarity is really important. So it starts with that organizational clarity. And in the high performing teams, there's not a ton of overlap between all the different types of roles. So field managers focus on coaching, RevOps focuses on the high quality data that's defensible. Enablement drives that behavioral change, and it's all being synchronized. And when you create these pods or hybrid models, they work well when there's functional organizational clarity and role clarity.
Yeah. So, it sounds simple, but can't tell you how many teams we see where the same enablement program is being run by 3 different groups. A lot of cooks in the kitchen, as you might say, right? Just they're all out of sync and it's leading to bad food.
Exactly. Got to get the recipe right.
So how often, let's see, you often talk, right, about competency mapping, Paul, actually, for Jim in multiple calls internally for us, right? What does that actually mean here?
Yeah, competency mapping isn't just about soft skills. So this is really thinking about the psychographic, behavioral science, understanding and evaluation of a role. And when you think about that, there's skills, there's knowledge, and there's talents behind each of these different roles. So defining that with a very high level of detail, and then mapping those competencies to business outcomes is where the rubber kind of meets the road. So when top organizations that we work with really tie the rep behavior to the business outcome. So for an example, a rep who masters narrative framing early in the stage has a much higher percent close rate, up to 30, let's say a third close rate than those who don't know how to narrative frame. And so we start to isolate some of these patterns that build the right revenue outcomes, and then look at the enablement that drives revenue. That's, again, that holy grail of the attribution of what we did from an enablement perspective to drive the outcomes.
Got it. So what about data-driven coaching then?
Yeah, so top reps, top teams don't rely just on the manager's memory or tribal knowledge. Coaching has to be embedded in the data, right? So that's the CRM, that's all of the tech stack feeding its data into the CRM, and then all the tools that are downstream of the CRM. We have to understand win-loss really well. We have to understand, some of the sales objectives that drive the revenue. And it has to be continuous and kind of personalized to the rep as well as to the team.
Gotcha. Yeah. So one of our clients here at ELB actually even tied coaching, like they tied coaching behaviors to their forecast accuracy. And guess what? Deal slippage dropped by 22% just by doing that one thing. So on
Amazing.
to then value messaging by buying stage, right? We've all seen sales decks that are stuck in feature mode. What are the top teams doing differently when it comes to value messaging?
Yeah, I can't just be talking about products and speeds and fees. We've got to be talking customer outcomes and helping the customers achieve their own momentum and opportunities. So the messaging shifts based on where the buyer is, not where the seller wants them to be or where even the sales leadership wants the sales stage to be. So it's buyer aligned, friction aware storytelling that's going to drive that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the last one here on this slide. Let's signal-based forecasting. What do you got?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so think about the signals that we're looking for. We're looking for the customer verifiable outcomes that they are at a particular stage or at a particular part of the process of decision making. And so, the best organizations are not forecasting based on the rep sentiment, just putting their finger in the air and saying, okay, it's wind's blowing that way. But we're basing it on buyer signals. So when the engagement drops, for example, or the decision-making team shifts, these are big red flags. We've got to now reevaluate the situation. We've got to look at, okay, who's new in the zoo that just came into this buying process? Are they now pulling it back towards an evaluation criteria where we maybe have already submitted a proposal? So we've got to look at all those signals to really understand deal velocity and make sure that our funnel, again, is of a high quality for forecast accuracy.
Yeah, that's critical in life sciences too, right? Signals like stakeholder, silence, risk-averse language are massive indicators here, and yet many teams still rely on deal stage alone.
That's true. And deal stage alone isn't enough. So really what you've got to do is bring all these different areas of focus together in terms of these key practices. So the role clarity plus the competency mapping, we've got embedded coaching with data-driven defensible data. We have buyer-aligned value messaging, and then we have a signal-based forecasting element. Those together are where you start to build real scale into those commercial engines.
Yeah, and most importantly, right, is you actually move enablement from reactive to strategic. Paul, before we actually move on, I actually want to go back a slide because I want to shout out Courtney in the chat here. Courtney, thanks for bringing up this question. This is actually going back to the ramp time with the reps, and she actually asked in the chat here, what is or are, right, some of the measures that we're using to define ramp time?
Yeah, and I talked a bit about that, but just to hone in a little more,
Yep.
I think it depends a bit on the role. So as we, again, define what roles with clarity are, for example, you might have a BDR or an inside salesperson, and you need to onboard that new person. They're going to have a focus on building high quality pipeline in terms of bringing high quality leads into the funnel, where they go from a let's say a BDR kind of qualified lead to a full sales qualified opportunity. And so what are the things that you need to do to bring a BDR up to productivity quickly? I would say things like activity. The activity levels have to be at a certain level in order to drive that confirmed meeting result. And the confirmed meeting is ultimately what the productivity metric will be based on. So your 30, 60, 90, if you will, from an enablement point of view for a BDR will be different from a closing rep in an account executive type role. And then there's a hierarchy sometimes within organizations for low, medium, and high, if you will, account executive capabilities, right? A mid-market rep might be more transactional sale focused, and a more strategic rep is going to be, building a book of business within an account, possibly doing land and expand strategies, and much more of a strategic type of focus. And so onboarding will play a role depending on which role type you're talking about. And I would also suggest that it's not just the pre-sale teams, it's also the post-sale customer-facing roles we need to look at in terms of productivity and onboarding as well, so that we're getting the productivity from those particular roles. The ramp time is going to be a little bit dependent on that. Just another nuance to this for even a BDR, the inbound might be different from the outbound. It might be quicker to get an inbound lead converted than an outbound prospecting because it's just more complicated. So I think the best in class teams are building the right metrics and data for their roles and for their business outcomes that they're focused on. And then the onboarding needs to measure and be able to track the improvements based on the enablement that they're doing.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps answer the question from Courtney. It's a great question, Courtney.
Yeah, excellent insights there. Yep. She said, love it. Courtney, we love you asking questions. Let's keep that momentum going there in the chat for sure. So great question. Okay. Back on track here though. So Paul, we've looked at what separates top performing commercial teams from some of those middling ones or ones that are struggling, right? Well, let's actually talk about the elephant in the room here, which is most organizations still treat enablement like it's a training department.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, I think, where one of the biggest areas of disconnect can be. Training is tactical, right? Enablement or real true enablement has to be strategic. It's not just about delivering content. It's really about driving behavioral change that produces revenue outcomes. And when you think about the structure, and we'll talk about the structure next, there has to be a kind of direct line to the strategic players within the go-to-market team so that there's mind share. We were just talking to an enablement organization the other day, and they had a challenge around just getting mind share and completions from their sellers. This is a more technical organization, and they tend to really look down on enablement as training that they're forced to take. And I think they set a metric of 17% completions for this multi-million-dollar training that they had pushed out. And we're looking at them like, you need to build rapport with the sales leaders, and you need to gain their accountability and trust that, maybe you get an SLA of 1 day per month of training, if you will, or 1 day a month of enablement content that they're going to commit to. Whatever that SLA is, you can hold to that SLA and ensure high quality enablement that's driving outcomes. But without that level of strategic perception within the buying organization or within the sales and go-to-market team, and without that accountability to drive that change, the culture is just going to erode, and you're just a training department.
Yeah. Boy, what a stat that is. So moving on from that though, because we could get lost in the weeds on that one, right? You've said before that enablement has to stop being the last mile delivery team and start acting more like a transformational engine. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, transformational engine, in our view, it starts with integration. And in modern organizations, enablement is aligned across 4 key levers. The first is talent. So are we hiring and developing the right capabilities? Are we identifying the right people based on that behavioral science for those roles that we're looking to fill? The second is the technology. And we talked about the complexity of technology. In the seller's world, technology has to be tools that enable and don't overwhelm. So we have to have a really smart view of the best of breed enablement stack, but also show the sellers how to use that stack in the flow of work to get the most effectiveness and the most efficiency out of their jobs. The third area is in the process side. So our sales stages map to how customers buy, and within our CRM, are we specifying when a deal moves from stage 3 to stage 4? Here's the buyer aligned triggers and behaviors we're looking for that validate that we can move that sales stage to the next level. And then it's really about the behavior, which is, are we reinforcing the right actions, the right behavior with incentives? Obviously, comp plans are going to tie into this, but also the data itself and how we present that data to the reps, and the coaching that goes along with it from the leadership team, which includes even coaching the managers from the VP down to the managers so that they're better coaches. So all of this creates that culture, but it starts with integration.
Right. So you're saying, right, it's not just about the playbooks or the LMS. It's really about tying all those elements together through the entire funnel.
Exactly. Yeah. When we diagnose enablement challenges in underperforming organizations, it's rarely due to the lack of content, right? We're always content rich, but it's more a breakdown in alignment between what reps are being taught and what managers reinforce, and what are some of the business expectations, and how does that align?
Right. So back to where we started on this slide, right? The minute it's clear, enablement, it's not just a function. It shouldn't act like the training department, right? It's an enterprise-wide transformation lever, and it's time that we treat it that way.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. So let's on to the next slide here. Okay. Let's talk about structure. Okay. So Paul, this visual here on this slide captures a pretty common dynamic that we see within the clients that we work with, right? Too many teams touching enablement, but nobody really owning it end to end, very fragmented. What's the problem with this kind of setup?
Well, it can be very chaotic, Micah. So in the before model here, you have field managers, you have enablement, you have L&D, product teams, even other teams like HR, who all have good intentions, but without alignment, and without that air traffic control system, the onboarding can be fragmented, the coaching can be inconsistent, and no one's really accountable for the revenue outcome.
True, true. So what often happens is each function builds its own version of enablement, right? Duplicative. Yeah, that's good. Duplicative tools, right? Uncoordinated programs and a frustrated sales force that's really wondering who to turn to.
Right. There's no one throat to choke. And what we try to push clients or encourage clients towards is more the after model, where it's not about centralizing necessarily everything under one leader, but it is about clarity. So the CRO is going to set the vision, the sales managers are going to coach, enablement's going to drive execution, and RevOps assures the data and systems are being aligned. And we've also seen best-in-class enablement roll up to the CRO, so that there's more of a strategic alignment and also accountability system for the managers.
Mm-hmm. And this is, what we've seen in our expertise in our interactions with life sciences, right, organizations, is this is in particular where they struggle, right? You've got compliance teams, MSLs, trainers, marketers, but they're all running in parallel, right? They're not in the same boat.
Yeah, that's true. And really in life sciences, when you have multiple go-to-market teams like pharma and med, running different plays, there's a risk of mixed messaging. And so that's one of the areas that you need to kind of produce probably plays that are tied to the roles. And you've got to architect a team like a go-to-market engine and not a patchwork.
Yeah. So the key takeaway here then from this slide, right? If you want enablement to scale, you need to design it for ownership, right? When everyone's clear on their lane, the entire org gets faster, cleaner, and far more accountable.
Exactly.
So let's dig into just another really important aspect here behind every enablement investment, and that's is it working, right? Are we actually changing outcomes, or are we just checking boxes?
Well, that's $1 million question, Micah. And here's the truth. Most organizations probably don't know. And are they tracking the right things? A lot of enablement teams are tracking completions, but they're not tracking competency. And top performing teams will take a different approach. They treat skills um, as a means to an end.
Right. So it's not enough to just say, yeah, we trained them, right? The real question is, did it show up in the field in win rates, deal velocity, stakeholder access, things that, right, that the C-suite is really going to care about?
Exactly. And that's why, some of the top teams will benchmark competencies and map them to the revenue outcomes. So for example, if we know that reps who master objection handling and reframing and mid-stage deals have 2 times better conversion rates, then that becomes a target competency that we would actually build an engineer for.
Okay, so it's not just about teaching everything, right? It's about teaching the right things, skills that actually show up in the revenue signals.
Yeah. I would say it's not just about teaching either, Micah. It's really about reinforcement of the right behaviors. So when we embed the behavioral nudges and do peer practicing and have CRM-based prompts to turn some of those taught skills into daily actions and behaviors that we can then practice like a habit. Again, back to that analogy of an athlete, right? We're practicing, we're building muscle memory. So the way I frame it is it's about the learn first, and then show me how it's done right, then do it, then we reinforce it, and then ultimately we own the outcome, we own the business result, and that's the framework. So learn, show, do, reinforce, and own.
Yeah. So my family being a big basketball family that we are, right? I can liken this to, I can go out and just shoot hoops, right? But if I don't shoot hoops with the proper form in the right context, right, that's not going to apply right when we get into actual gameplay. So when we're talking about skills to outcomes here, right, in the framework of what we're talking about here with sales enablement and sales transformation, right, we mean skills that are actually going to move the needle, skills that close the gap between potential and performance.
Exactly.
Got it.
So and really when you isolate those skills, I think that's an important part of it. The enablement starts to become that growth engine and less of that cost center.
Got it. Yeah, that's really important. So, Paul, we're gonna have to hustle through the next few slides. We've only got about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we leave some time for some Q&A. So, right, we've talked about what needs to change in enablement, but let's make it real now, right? What does great enablement look like in action?
Yeah, so high impact enablement is not just sitting in a training portal. It actually lives in the flow of work. So it's not a program, it's a system. So let me kind of walk you through where it starts from. It starts with the playbooks. And it's really tied to how the customer buys. Again, those sales stages that we have are in our CRM, but really how the customer buys is how the customer is experiencing our product, our solution, as they go through the awareness of pain and the evaluation process to determine how we're solving for pain. And then ultimately, is there going to be an ROI and a value and a business case for that solution? So it means, the guidance that reps use is going to be more contextual, from a deal type to buying stage to persona, and the compliance piece. It all matters.
Got it. And so once you've got playbooks, right, that actually reflect the reality, right, of that buyer experience, right, not just the check boxes of your CRM, right? From that point, it's really about performance, yeah?
Yeah. And how do you measure
reinforcement? Sorry, reinforcement more so.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say a little bit of both, right? And that means that we have coaching now embedded in the workflows as well. And it's not just about a ride along once a quarter or some kind of LMS video that you watch. We're talking about real-time feedback from actual call data, conversation intelligence. We use a tool for that, and it becomes extremely relevant to go back and look at snippets of conversation. the CRM engagement is going to give us some data, but even the AI tools this day can nudge the reps into better behavior, and enablement meets the rep where they work as part of that.
Yeah. And then I love the last piece on this slide because it's one of the most foundational pillars that when I'm talking to clients in life sciences now, right, this is one of the things that they're most keened in on, right, is actually integration with the CRM and analytics, because if you can't measure what's going on out there, right, then you can't improve it.
Yeah, exactly. You can't expect what you don't inspect. Spot on. And we're not tracking just completions. We're looking at, engagement velocity, buyer sentiment shifts, even rep coach alignment. So it's not an event of training. It's a living adaptive system of enablement. So why don't we go ahead and throw up the next polling question?
Yeah.
Since you're probably focused on scaling here, what is your organization currently measuring in terms of sales enablement impact? What are those metrics for success that you guys are focused on?
Yeah. And this is a multi-select, right? This isn't a one select. So please select all that apply on this particular question.
Right.
While people are answering that question, actually, Deb in the chat said, "Can you speak more, Paul, to," and maybe we can, again, we're a little tight on time. Want to make sure we get through everything we need to, but maybe we spend a minute or two on this, right? Can you speak a little bit more to coaching that's built into the workflow? Giving another example of best practices when it comes to the coaching.
Yeah, I think absolutely, Deb. Another great question. When it comes to the workflow or the flow of work, that could be day to day, and that can also be in terms of your CRM and your sales process itself. When a deal is stuck in the funnel, I think that would be a good example of a coaching opportunity. Because it's just been sitting there for a while, and maybe the rep keeps kicking it out, the next month, the next month, the next quarter. You have to get involved in asking the right kinds of questions. Have we really identified the right buyer behavioral signals that confirm that we're at this point in the process, or should we kick it back and go back to discovery, go back to qualification? That would be a good opportunity to build coaching into the flow of work. I think another one is just when you're dealing with the quantity and type of activity we expect for a particular behavior. Let's say it's prospecting. Are you giving coaching feedback to the rep that maybe they're not engaged in the type of activity level that we would expect for that in order to build the kind of pipeline they need, and not just rely on BDRs who maybe aren't performing?
Yeah, two great examples there. Deb, you're very welcome. Okay. Tim, let's go ahead and show the results of this poll question here.
It's kind of a mix again. Wow.
Another
Even
one.
distribution.
Gosh, I love it so much. Okay, so ramp time, quota attainment, win rates. We don't track it consistently.
And don't tracking it, yeah.
That's a big one.
Quota attainment's always number one, though. I think that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of meeting the number.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, not surprising that's the number one there. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward here. We've got just a handful of slides and about 11 minutes to get through it. And I want to leave some time for any Q&A there at the end. So I guess I got to change the slide, don't I? All right, Paul, when's the last time a buyer actually said, "Wow, I just moved myself from SQL to demo"?
Yeah, we've seen this, right? It's kind of a rep's dream to move things around the funnel where they need to go in the rep's mind. But in the truth, buyers don't care about your CRM stages, right? They care about solving business problems, and they want to get confidence in your solution that it can actually help them solve the business problems. So most sales teams are stuck selling to their pipeline, not to their customer.
So I can liken that to, right, it's trying to guide somebody through a GPS route, right? Maybe you've got an old MapQuest thing that you printed out back in 2015, right? And wondering, why they're off course.
Yeah, and it's funny because you think about, these progressions through the funnel as a linear course, but really buyers, the old linear funnel is kind of thrown out the window, because the reality today is it's very signals based. We've been talking about signals a lot today. So buyers zigzag, right? They might ghost you. What are they doing when they ghost you? Maybe they're out researching silently. They're validating things behind the scenes. Maybe they're talking to a competitor. And if you're not picking up on those signals, you're probably flying blind.
Yeah, that's very true. I can speak from experience there on that one. So
We all can.
let's sure. Let's walk through the shift then here, right? On the left side of the slide here, we've got the traditional MQL to proposal pipeline, which again, right, great for dashboards, not obviously so awesome for nuance.
Yeah. So when you look at the bottom right, the contrast is it's prioritize, educate, validate, and justify. So these are basically moments and not milestones, and they're driven by buyer behavior, not our wishful thinking.
Sure. So instead of saying, right, oh yeah, she's at stage 3, we should be asking, right, has she validated ROI with her internal team, right? Has she made the business case?
Exactly. And if she hasn't, maybe it's time not to send the proposal. Maybe it's time to reframe the value, because that's where she's at in the buyer stage, the buyer journey.
Yeah, for sure. So bottom line here, right? Your process should be able to flex to how your buyers are buying, right? If your funnel still looks like a a sausage factory from 2012, it's time for a redesign.
Yeah, no offense to sausage. Let's modernize it.
Listen, I love sausage. The best breakfast meat, by the way, just sausage. Anyway, okay. So before we close, right, here's something that we're excited to share. We're not just selling the ST&E playbook here at ELB, right? We're actually living it. I'm going through this on a day-by-day basis in the flow of my work, right? ELB is applying our own framework to transform our internal sales team.
Yeah, it's quite a great use case and for us because we're able to experience our tools and the flow of work that we need to use to elevate our sellers to have those great, meaningful, value-based conversations with C-suite executives to earn a seat at the table with the validated business reason in an area maybe they're not comfortable with or they're not as familiar with. So using our immersive arcades, using our rehearsal, being able to articulate with confidence is something we're training our ELB sales reps to do, and we call that our drinking our own champagne case study. And Micah, you yourself have experienced that. Any quick insights from your side after going through some of the initial mission assignments?
Yeah, the interactivity of the training and being able to then apply it right within our own training tools and sales enablement tools has been really impactful for me. I've seen really good growth just in myself over the past few months. So within that, right, not just the experience, but we're actually we talked about it on the last slide, right? We're measuring everything, right? Ramp time, opportunity progression, messaging effectiveness, the same way that we would encourage and be able to apply for any of our clients as well.
Yeah, 100%. We're able to showcase this as an example of what we can build for them. And at the outcome of this entire play, it's actual real meaningful funnel. It's not just, a bunch of learning.
Yeah, it's not just a training exercise, right? We're actually putting it into practice in our own pipeline, in our own funnels, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because obviously if it doesn't work for us, right, doesn't belong in your organization either.
Correct. Let's go ahead and skip ahead for time. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, we've walked through enablement chaos, right? Because it truly is, as of right now, it's kind of chaos out there. Buyer disconnects, coaching gaps. Sounds like we need a hero to save the revenue day, right? Flash, Batman signal up in the sky right now, right? Enter ST&E.
Yeah, I was going to go dun 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 dun. So this is more of the Superman music.
Sure.
But yeah, that's right. So ST&E stands for Sales Transformation and Enablement. It is a modular, measurable, scalable sales system rooted in buyer psychology and sales map, powered by diagnostics, coaching, playbooks, and psychometrics. And this is not training, it's commercial transformation.
Yeah, love it. And so for those wondering about this, right? This isn't your old school type of training program, right? This is strategy plus execution. This isn't just consultancy. It's consultancy plus let's get work done, right? Modular, measurable, scalable.
Exactly. So modular, we don't need a forklift to get going, guys. We can drop in with the diagnostic, fix your onboarding, build a coaching loop, fix whatever's bleeding.
Measurable means, right, no more gut feel enablement, right?
So yeah, we're learning behaviors, we're learning tools and validating actual KPIs like quota attainment and pipeline velocity, buyer validation signals. We're tracking all of it.
And scalable, of course, means if you love it, right? If it's impactful, if you see impact, true ROI, we can grow it, right? If you hate it, well, we can stop right there, right? But we can still pivot around it.
Yeah, we're really building this to be nimble between, the smaller mid-sized organizations up to the bulletproof kind of Fortune 500s that need to completely re-architect and scale. So whether you have 50 sellers or 5,000 sellers, we can adapt to your model.
Right. So if you've been stuck in tactical training land and wondering why sellers, right, keep missing the mark, right, our SC&E playbook and is something that you should probably consider and could be your exit ramp.
Yeah, we're happy to meet you where you are. We'll take the wheel if you need us to, but we'll also just co-pilot. So either way, your go-to-market org is about to fly straighter.
Yeah, absolutely. So if what we've been saying, if you're kind of nodding along, right, if this is truly what you're experiencing, right, in your own enablement teams, right, if you're saying like this is exactly kind of what we need, right, good news, you don't need a 6-month planning cycle to get started here.
Yeah, no, that's true. We like to say, start small, we'll scale fast, and that's where we built this new ST&E benchmark diagnostic. And this is something that is a free assessment tool that gives you clarity in a few days.
Yeah, it's quick, painless. It shows you how your team stacks up across enablement, coaching, buyer alignment, and right, we're not grading on a curve either.
Right. Yeah. And you'll get a report that shows you where your gaps are and more importantly, what to do about them. And then we'll walk you through in a short strategy session with no strings attached.
Right. And so, post this, right, we'll be following up, right? So check your email over the next week, right, to learn from our team and book time with us, right? We'd be happy to engage with anybody on this call if you're really facing these business challenges within your organizations.
We would love
we've
that.
thrown up, yeah, and so we've thrown up the last poll here. Obviously, we've only got a couple minutes left, so please, if you'd like to hear from us, if you'd like to explore this option, let us know. We're happy to follow up with you.
Absolutely. Just checking any last minute questions here, Micah, that we can respond to. Yeah,
Steven said, "What's MapQuest?" And I appreciate that. Whether that's good satire, good sarcasm, I hope it is. I'd encourage you to Google it if you're being honest. But
I was with some friends the other day. We were talking about MySpace. It was just reminding me of all those past fun applications and platforms.
Tom stayed in my top 10 friends like the entire time on MySpace, like for sure.
Amazing. So, yeah, and then you had the almost Survivor like voting them off the island if they weren't in the top 10.
That's funny. Okay. Everybody, thank you for the time today. We really appreciate it. Please, if there are any last questions, like Paul and I will hang out. If there are any last questions or anything else you want to throw in the chat, we're happy to talk with you. Otherwise, we will be following up. We'd love to schedule time with you to do a one-on-one session or a small group session if there's others within your organization that you want to bring along. But we're really passionate about this, right? And the ST&E, playbook and plays that we're running here at ELB, that we're seeing incredible impact on our clients, and it's leading to really long-term relationships and ways that we can partner. So we hope that we get the opportunity to do the same with you.
Ditto that. Appreciate it, everyone.
All right, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day.